now called. We are on the north side of that. This side of the street is North Hollywood. The hills you see on the film are the Burbank Hills, and the homes above are some of the homes of very beautiful homes of Burbank. The north side of the street is Sun Valley. As Jimmy mentioned, it's changed its name years gone by. It was an old railroad town. It's been known for several hundred years. It became a railroad town in the mid-1800s, and brought in material for the ranchers, for the landowners, because it was a great grape-growing country here. We're now panning by the houses. As you see, they are old-style homes, and I think we're getting to a sign. You'll see Sherman Way, which is an alley that goes up north of the street. This is where the big field has been here for many years, and as we pan up towards what is Riverton Street, running north and south in the valley, you'll find that this house, my house, was between Riverton and Clybourne on the north side of the street in Sun Valley. The building you see towards the end of the shot was the original Flying Tiger Line building, and the Flying Tigers, of course, were well-known World War II flyers, the Chenault Group, and they had their headquarters here when they went into business from this airport. It is still a Flying Tiger Line office, although their main offices now, I understand, have moved to Texas. The mountains in the background are hardly discernible today. These hills, that's about what they are. Mountainous hills run on an average, the area we're in, of up to about 2,000, 2,500 feet. And as you go back towards the east, they go up to Mount Wilson, which is approximately about 7,500 feet, 7,500 feet, I believe, or 7,600 feet, I believe, is Mount Wilson. So that's just briefly a sort of a geographical means of locating where we are. And from here on, we'll more or less, I think, go towards the house and take a few shots of the house, maybe go inside. This is where the first hotline, I believe, that there ever was to try to help addicts with the ideas that we had at that time. There weren't many of us, that's for sure. But we were willing to try these ideas and see if we could make some kind of a dent in the disaster that was taking place even then in the field of addiction. Things have changed a lot in the intervening years. I don't think we've gotten much better in many ways. We do know that thousands of addicts are walking the streets today that probably wouldn't have made it otherwise. This is only due to the dedication of a lot of people in the intervening years. People who are willing to put aside their own selves, their own self-will and their own ego in order to help others like ourselves. I think we'll move over now. We'll take a shot and we'll move over now towards the house where my old truck and my van and Jimmy's car and Betty's car are sitting, and see what we can do over there. Now you got it. We have moved over a little closer to the house, and what you're looking at, I believe, is what originally was my roofing and later on my painting office, when I used to paint and roof in the construction industry here in the valley for many years. And this is where actually the World Service Office, as we know it today, really got its start, because although there had been another World Service Office, and we'll go into detail about that later, down in Crenshaw, in one way or another we wound up in one little part of an office in the Menlo Street area of Los Angeles, in a building that belonged to suicide prevention, which was not really beneficial to our fellowship at all. We wound up moving out of there and into a 1.5 room place over a bail bondsman's office in Van Nuys, about 7 miles to the west of the house here, which didn't even have a parking place for a car. So you couldn't stay in the office more than an hour trying to do anything. We had very little literature and no facilities, honestly, to do much of anything. We used to go out and collect cardboard boxes from behind stores in order to send out the few booklets we had, and do many things like that. Cut up paper bags to wrap some tapes in, or to wrap some booklets in. So when we got here, by the time we got here, and that's another part of the story, this is only going to be brief. We got here, we can go into it. This was a little office. It's only 9 by about 11 and a half, very small. Later on in the documentary, we'll show still pictures. We'll put them on the film so they can be seen as to what it was like. And of course, it extended over into the rest of the house. We were talking, and we were rapping, and we were calling in the kitchen, and that extended over then into the living room, and practically took over the whole the whole house before we were done. But we were growing. We were putting every penny we could make then into the office so that we could have enough material. I had always believed that the tradition should be followed. The tradition should be followed, but the tradition should be followed fully, or more fully than we had been in the past, because we had difficulties there before. One of the things I did consistently believe in was the fact that we should pay our way. As the tradition states, we should learn to be responsible and pay our way. And from the time that the office was moved into the house here until the time that it moved up to other larger headquarters, which we will see later in Sun Valley, we did just that. Anything we bought, we paid for cash on the barrelhead. We had no credit established for a long time. We finally established credit, even though we could have paid for the materials. In order to establish credit, we talked to people and established good credit for the World Service Office, and we had an excellent reputation in that regard. With the business people we did business with, and the bank that we did business with. Maybe I seem to be getting a little far afield. I think we'll move up. Maybe bring the camera up, a little closer up to the house here. You can see that's the address, 10717 Sherman Way. It's a little old part of the building that I added on about 28 years ago. And it's showing signs of wear yet. Needs another paint job. I was too busy at the office in the last 7.5 years to do much painting. I think I got it painted once in seven or 8 years. We're going to move a little closer here to the building, and maybe go in through the gate towards the front door. Although the front door was used very, very little. This side door right here, where you see the little entranceway, there'll be more addicts have come to that door looking for help, and more clean addicts have come to that door looking for friendship, as they have come in from other parts of the world. And we've had them from all over. We've had them from Australia, from Canada, from Great Britain, from Ireland, and many points south of here, south of the border and north of the border. And there's always been one of the biggest parts of my life that these things happen. That I could get to know so many people all over the world because of simply trying to help myself as well as to help others. So I think we'll move now into the gate. But thank God we've got a gate. I only put this fence up a few years back. As this neighborhood is changing, altering. You see, we don't have much of a yard here. This is no elaborate California home. Just an ordinary, everyday house, well lived in, good vibrations in it. People come in here, they want to come back. And I think that's, to have something like this said about my home or our home, I think is a wonderful thing. You see, I do like plants. There's all the normal and the abnormal things that you see around here. There's Hoya over there. Some of the first Hoya was ever brought into this country is a hybrid. I have over to your right over there, under the little maple tree. And also Australian Hoya right next to it on this side. It's just getting like a documentary for Homes and Gardens or something, and it's hardly that type of situation.
Can't shoot into the sun.
We're trying to get something so that people can see, because these are the questions they ask, you know. What was it like in the World Service Office? What was in your home? Where is your home? How big is it? What does it look like? Send me some pictures. You know, I'd like to see the place that I talk to so often when I call. And of course we got some of the beautiful flowers that do belong in California. The bird paradise by the front window. The hummingbird feeders. The bird feeder that just blew off the other day is laying on the ground here. Lots of birds come here all the time. And of course, a lot of aloe here. And great blue in the healing colors of aloe. And that's about it. You know, I putter around. I don't have much time to do all the things I'd like to do. I prefer to be busy most of the time, and I always have enough to do, but I'll never have enough to do all the things I want. Some plants here that should have been repotted 20 years ago. That first one you saw over there should have been repotted 20 years ago, but I just never got around to it. But you know, it's flowering, and very few hoyas flower in this north of the border. But this one does, twice a year. I don't know whether you can see, it's a little old porch that I put on here years ago. This used to be all white open. And where we came from on some of the original shots across the street, there's a big hangar now, and the hangar's to the west. And this used to be a beautiful view of the Santa Monica Mountains right across the valley. You can see the whole valley. But they're still in my view, but I recall it. I remember what it was like. And so I don't worry too much about the experimental lab they have across the street there. As a matter of fact, something just happened. While we were across the street, the security men came by to see who we were and what we were photographing. So we had to straighten that one out too. Shows they're on the ball. Then through my kitchen into what was originally the World Service Office here in the house that I was talking about a little earlier. You can't see very much from here, but it's just an idea to sort of orient ourselves as to where we are. The kitchen, of course, was where, right about that shot in the kitchen, is where we had our first hotline. And used to be able to get in there, and everybody else could go ahead and try to do their thing while I wasn't trying to interrupt them too much. They coming on the everyday affairs. Well, my first wife was still very crazy at times, trying to answer questions, and she was not an addict. Wasn't too happy, and I can understand very well about all the things that were going on, the people that were calling at different times, seeking help, wanting to know where meetings were, where people were, where they could find a connection, and all the other things they go to make up the thing that we call our lives. But we lived through it. And of course, at the present time, most of you know, my wife is Betty, who's also a member of the fellowship, and who helped us so much when the World Service Office was moved into the Van Nuys area, where she lived at that time. This was previous to our marriage. She helped in the office. We got acquainted with each other, and of course has been the right-hand man in getting out so much of the original material we have in the last 7 years, particularly the first directories that she put together, typed, and we finally got out to the fellowship, among other things, because we were always short-handed. I could make a commentary here on the nature of the addict, and particularly on the nature, I guess, of the clean addict in NA, but that'll have to wait. We'll get some of that on tape perhaps later on. Perhaps we'll get some of it in print. But that's an entirely different story. This is the area here, and particularly over to my right from where I'm sitting now, sitting right in this place right here many years ago in trying to organize my own thoughts in order to try to understand the program we had, in order to try to see if what I was doing was right for me as well as anybody else, and to see if I could find maybe a better direction, maybe some more positive aspects of looking at the program, since you know as well as I do how depressing some of even our meetings can become. If we start off on a negative note, we can carry it through. The big job, I've been very fortunate in the fact that I've always been sort of optimistic. I've always been on the upside. I'm a speeder. Thank God, so is Betty. We get along well in that regard. And I used to try to wonder, what can we do to make it any better? What can we do to improve? And I thought, from what I've learned of the program, it's what I learned. And what I'm able to offer to other people is most important. Not trying to do things for other people. They're supposed to do things for themselves. Just offer the opportunity. Offer your support. Offer your empathy in particular. Empathy in particular, because it seems as though at times we forget, we get so tied into trying to do something for somebody, you know. We're not saviors, we're not teachers, we're not preachers. We're only people who have recovered our own life, our own sanity, our own health. And this is what we can offer to other people, only an example. I think we get hung up on that sometimes. So as a result of that, we've got two pieces of literature, very small pieces in the white book, and in another folder that were written, sitting right here, trying to understand myself, trying to understand what I was trying to hang on to, trying to understand what I was trying to get, and trying to understand what it meant after I got it, because I believed in two things, freedom and meaning in my life. This has probably caused me a lot of trouble at times, but it's also brought me to where I am today. I believe my life is successful today. I'm living as the kind of person I'm supposed to be, I think, and that to me is success. And that's all we can offer to anybody also. This is no great philosophical statement, but another look was a collection, really, of things, ideas that went through my own mind, my own consciousness, that I tried my own life to understand, and came out in that writing. I just picked up a book, pad, and started writing, and that's what came out. I only had to change it once, and that was after it'd been in print for a long time. Recovery and Relapse was the first one previous to that, and that was written sitting right here too. And I was trying to understand addiction. I was trying to understand addicts. I was trying desperately to understand myself. I was trying to find a better way to do what we were trying to do. And I think it's this trial and error that's so important. I think this is the reason we are such an unstructured fellowship and should be kept that way. The authoritarianism that some of us have individually, I know I have it very often. I make a statement, you would think it was unquestioned or unquestionable, but that happens to be my way. People think I'm angry at times because I get so enthusiastic and so tied into what I'm doing. That's simply not so. I think that for so many people, you and I, we are tied into so many different things. We're tied into ourselves. We're the people that we know ourselves to be. We're the people that others think we are. And we're the people probably that our parents thought we ought to be. But that all of these are just parts and parcels of our entire life. We each in our own way, in this program, in this way, have to find the means of recovery. My mind's been working while I've been sitting here talking, you know, and perhaps I didn't make myself as clear about the two parts of our literature that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the whole Little White Book. I'm talking about one part that we put into that at the insistence of several of the members at that time. I told them I had written this for me. This was part of my story. These are the things that I had to do. And I put it on paper, and as we would talk, sitting here at the house very often, some of the first members, this is what I'll talk about later on, there's some discrepancies here that are very hard to cover at all points at the same time. We almost died out in 1959. We got together again, decided to live by the traditions. This ties into what I talked about earlier. And in so doing, then we got a new group. There were a few of the old group left who had not been going to meetings. Started all over again, starting with 3 people. And we really started all over again in November of 1959 and took off from there. So these things I had written for myself as part of my story. And some of the members then who had read it, because we exchanged things with each other, insisted that it be put into the White Booklet. And since they all had a voice in what was going on, this is what took place. There's practically the insistence of Sylvia Wexler, whose name I can now mention because Sylvia passed away several years ago, and Penny Kay from San Jose, who's one of my oldest friends on the program. That this went into the book. There have been attempts at times to change the White Book. Fellowship voted against it a number of times. The attempts are still being made, but I feel that that part is part of my story, and if it would ever be changed, it would be changed only by myself. Those were the provisions that I made when I put that in, that it would not be changed because it was an integral part of my story. It could only be changed if I updated myself in the light of something else I might learn. The other part, the folder that I talked about, Another Look, the attempt was made to change that several times at the conferences, and it was left alone. I made some changes only to bring Another Look up to, more or less up to date as part of NA. And I did that on my own volition. Right here, the day after the vote was taken at the conference, I think that was the 1980 conference or the 79. I can't recall definitely which. But these are two parts that were important to me. And some of the attempts and some of the paraphrasing in the book that were done from Another Look, I still feel are misleading in the light of my own story. However, this material that be useful to somebody, the way it is, or the way it has been changed and altered a little, I'll go along with that right now, but I don't want to change in the future. Nobody should have the right to change your story. Nobody should have the right to change my story. Regardless of their intentions, it is not the right thing to do in a fellowship such as ours. Good, bad, or indifferent, that's what we are. And that's the way it should stand. If you don't want to use it, that's another story. That's fine. But each of us has a right to write our own story, to write our own conceptions, to write our own ideas that might be beneficial to other members of this fellowship. And no one has a right to stop us. We don't need an imprimatur like they do in religious tracts or religious books. I don't believe we need that. I don't believe any little group or big group has a right to impose their ideas on anyone else. There are no bosses in NA. I've never attempted to be a boss. I resent being boss. I'm still not a hater of authority. If authority is responsible, I will recognize it. Other than that, I have no time for it. And I think maybe that clarified a little bit some of the questions people have asked me when these things have come up in the past as to how I felt about it. Why did I write these things? Why was it written the way it was? It was written the way it was because that's simply the way I felt at the time. That's the way I understood what I was trying to do at the time. And that's the way I understood I could best help my fellow addict. Or sister addict, whatever way you want to put it. I think there's about enough said on that. I will respond. This is the original little town Sun Valley, the park on the left, and the old, well, the World Service Office building I mentioned earlier. We'll see before this documentary is over. Now going up over the Carson railroad tracks. The mentioned this is where the old depot used to be, as I understand it, years ago. This was the main section. It's the old Rusco hardware store on the right that's been here for many, many years. One of the oldest families in this locality, outside of the old original, many of the old original people who came here in the late 1890s and the early 1900s. What we're going to do now, we're going to go across the tracks. This is San Fernando Road. You might be able to see it above the light. We're going to turn right. And then we're going to cross over on Diagonal Street here, which is Arminta Street. This is where some people have heard me talk about the old original Sunland Lumber Company. This is the area right in here on the left where the old Sunland Lumber Company used to be. Many years ago, one of the old original businesses in this area. As you can see, the hills are in the foreground up here.
You can't see them.
You can't see them well. On the left here, you'll find out we're coming up to a little church. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up, turn around the corner, tell you a little bit about this church, what it was like.
Out of sight.
In 1953, so I'm going to turn around and we're going to come down.
Don't get too close when you come around.
And I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pull on the wrong side of the street. How about that? See where we are?
You need it through the windshield.
Oh, you want it through the windshield?
Yeah.
Oh, that's all right. Let me pull in here and turn the... I would like to get a little better shot than this. How much can you see through the windshield?
Come left a little more. That's good. Back off a little to the right.
A little to the right.
The rear view's on the right there's good. Good.
You can see this is a Clybourne Street that I mentioned down near the house. This is also Clybourne Street, but north of the railroad tracks, Southern Pacific Railroad tracks. And this is the corner of Clybourne and Arminta Streets. This was originally the Dad's Club, owned by the Salvation Army, where for $5 a month we held a meeting every Monday night. And there's really very few facilities in the church. I don't know whether there's anybody here in the church or not that we can get inside. We'll check later. But up towards the front where you see the sign, this was all open. Those trees that you see were not planted as yet. I believe they call them, they are cypress, but it has a specific name, Columbia cypress, I think. And this is the corner that I used to talk about. Right beside the door there, I had made a sign, a handmade sign, that all it said was NA. And the people would pull down from the back of the church, coming down the street. They would come down fairly fast, and they would start to slow up when they got about here. I would be standing by the door. As I would see them come around, I would walk out towards the curb. They would turn around this corner, and just as soon as they saw me and saw the sign, they'd split. They'd take off down that street as fast as they could go, because they didn't know whether we were staked out or not. We were not. That's part of the history, that we had gone down to the vice squad, and from there we went to the narcotic division, and I talked to the lieutenant down there, and he had given us his assurance he was willing to help addicts. He believed in what we were trying to do, and he would not stake out any of our meeting places. And to the best of our knowledge, they never have. He's never given us any real trouble. Accidentally at times we've become involved with the police, but that has always been straightened out. Just pretty good sized church. We can get quite a number of people in there. And up towards the front at the entranceway, there's just one little restroom, and that's the only place where you have anything available. A little sink, toilet of course, and a little sink in there, and that's where we had to get our water and make coffee. No kitchen facilities. I went out and bought a little electric stove, and then later on bought a little gas stove.
Cut.
And there was only the facilities for making coffee there, no place really to wash anything up. And so we had to use another little room on the other side. That would be the left side of the front door. And we set up our coffee, and we make the coffee there, and later on we'd wash the cups. At that time, we just started to collect some cups because these were our first meetings. I think I still have about half a dozen of the old original sets of cups that we used to take from meeting to meeting, because nobody could afford to buy any paper cups or anything else in those days. Nobody was working at that time. And but this was the beginnings here. We stayed there for quite a while until such time as another part of the story of the history of NA will be told, where there were some elections held. There's a lot of bad feeling. There's a lot of arguments going on. Some others took over the running of the affair, and they decided to move from here to another building in a hospital setting, which didn't sit well with too many people, because we felt that they had been, and later it was proved that they had been violating traditions in the way they had done things. They were not following traditions as wisely as they should, and it caused us many problems in the end. However, we were doing the best we could with what we had. So that primarily is what this little building is. It is now a little Spanish church. It principally looks exactly like it was then. It's been repainted since. It's got a new roof on it since. But the doors look the same, except for the cypress in the front. It's exactly as it was then. It hasn't changed a bit, with the exception of the cross on the top and the trees in the front and the sign that says, I can't read it really from here, Iglesia de something.
Iglesia Lididos Vivante. And that's as close as I can get.
I can't see it from here with my glasses. But that's it. So we're going to take a ride over now to Stagg Street, which was the other house concerned with the other member of our original little group. We're talking about getting something started to help the attic. So let's go and see if I can find it again. It's still here. The last time it was over. We'll get a shot of it at least, and if it has been moved or changed since that time, I have it on some still photographs at home. So we can get a little shot of it here for our history. Fine. Again, we're now actually in the Burbank area now. Clyburn's one of the dividing lines. This is now, and has been for a long time, primarily a Spanish neighborhood. A long, long while. Our small homes, fairly new homes, well-kept homes, some run-down homes, just the way this area is. I'm not quite sure whether I go north to Stagg or south to Stagg, so I'll probably go south. I believe it's south. We're at DeGarmo. I think I made a mistake back there. I believe I said Arminta Street. It isn't Arminta Street, it's Cantara Street.
Yeah, you did say Arminta.
Did I say Arminta?
Yeah.
I do that so often. I don't know why I do. But anyway, it was Clybourne and Cantara, not Arminta. Well, I've only lived here 44 years, so what do you expect? Perfection yet, maybe? This is where I found the body from my truck, Jimmy.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this takes us up on San Fernando Road. Now, what I'm looking for is Stagg Street.
Why don't we just fade out for a little while?
Yeah,
then?
why don't we do that till we get down to it? Because I'll probably have to turn that way and get back. Now, Stagg, we're going to have to go to the right. I mean, to the left here. I don't know whether you're going to be able to get a shot here. Let's see if I can get a good shot here.
Where are you?
Of the house.
The yellow one?
The house here, right here with the...
We're good.
Keep going. Yeah, we're at the corner of Stagg and Arcola in the Sun Valley. I'm not quite sure whether it's Sun Valley or whether it's Burbank. They've changed some of the boundaries in the last number of years. However, the house that is behind the white VW, my white VW, where the trailer is parked, the station wagon, is at 10165 Stagg Street. This was the home of one of the girls by the name of Doris, who was one of the original committee. And Doris and I, our phones were just busy all the time in the early part of 1953. So we were trying to get something together to help the addicts. Her husband was an alcoholic, an old friend of mine, a member of AA, who also did everything he could to help us. He's still a member in good standing of that organization. Frank and Doris had a machine shop in the garage, as you'll see in a few minutes. We'll take another shot. It's right beside the house, where they both worked in order to make ends meet at that time. And later on, of course, he branched out into another business of his own, in which he was very successful. But they were two of the original friends of mine, and myself, plus several others, the barber Tommy, and another member of AA who was also an addict, Paul. And these were the original group that tried to really start getting something done. Thought it might be good to move down the way a little. Jimmy, do you think we can run that down, or should we maybe drop it a little? We should drop it and shoot it. It'd be easier to run. A little more, I think this would be all right. I think it'll move fairly smooth once it gets rolling. Are your wheels, are the wheels loosened? Wait a minute.
Free.
Wheels free?
Yep.
Not doing very, not a very smooth job, but I can stop. Just lift, why don't you just lift it and carry it down? Knock it off for just a minute and stand it. A little off of this.
I got it.
All right. We're moving towards the east. There's a plane overhead. They're always overhead here. And going down the east, now we'll begin to turn towards the north again, take a shot of the house where you can see the garage. We had a beautiful home here at that time. It was large, pretty large lot. And they had it fixed up with a nice patio in the rear. And of course the wide porch in front was the old California style earthquake style home, as they call it, earthquake construction. Balloon construction called out here. We'll stand up to a pretty good shake without falling apart. Okay, stop right here. Get a little better shot of the front of the house. For about 3 months we were either here at my house or at one of the other old barber shop discussing our plans. Many of the people in the program have read the minutes of those first meetings before we ever got together to have a meeting. And so this is where some of it was done, this is where some of it was typed. And these were some of the places we hung out at that time. I don't think I can add much to that at the present time right here, except that it was really nice. There weren't too many homes here at that time. They were all practically brand new, with the hills in the background over by Glen Oaks Boulevard, which is the main thoroughfare throughout the valley in this area. There's some of the hill homes that have been building lately. You can see a lot of from the New York Convention. from the convention in New York. I need a little more cord. Oh, the miseries of this kind of life. Yeah. From the New York Convention in September of 1983, where I had a marvelous time. 30th anniversary of the founding of NA from this part of the world on the Pacific coast, Los Angeles, to New York on the east. It was a terrific experience. And I hope it's one that will be repeated many times in the future. I believe that we've covered pretty much what we came out to do on this particular event.
Where do you want it to pan?
Yeah, I want to get another place coming in from the back, you know.
Yeah.
Just watch it coming in and I just pan up as far as I can go and I quick swing around and get a landing. Like they do on TV, you know?
Yeah. This is, what's the name of this street?
This is Clybourne.
Clybourne, yeah.
See how you get all confused all the way we came, you know, we just came from Clybourne up to the other one,
Yeah.
back to Clybourne again.
Well, how often did you go to that church up there?
We were in that church from about October up until about, I guess, about 6 months.
Uh-huh. And then you went over to the house
And
on
then-
Stag?
And then, no, and then they moved the meeting down to the Schreier's Dryer.
Uh-huh.
And that's when I sort of had a break with all those people. That's when I was getting that. I always had trouble with people. I always had trouble with opinionated people.
Uh-huh.
No, I don't have trouble with people of opinion. I can understand that. But I have the trouble with people who will not live by the rules that they made and they said they would keep. That's the kind of people I have trouble with.
Uh-huh.
If somebody says I'm going to be a no good SOB, that's the way I am, I can accept that, you know. That's his rules, live it, fine. Don't tell me you're living by something you're not living by, you know, and that's what we can't go for in this program. In this program, you know, we're not preachers, we're not teachers, we're not gurus, you know, we're not politicians.
Yeah.
We get all that out of the way, then we get down to fine points, then we can agree or disagree all we want. As long as we agree on the rules that we're working with, you know?
Yeah.
And there's only one rule, you're willing to help. First yourself and somebody else. So you're willing to do it in a way that you'll be responsible. You're not living by the traditions.
How many meetings did you have at the house? I mean, regular
Very,
meetings?
very, very few.
Yeah.
We had one or two. We had some, when we first started getting other little groups together, we had business meetings at the house.
Uh-huh.
Because of your mother's attitude, the way she felt about it, you know, it was kind of hard. It was very hard on her, and it was hard on the kids, you know, on you guys.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have too many, you know, they didn't understand what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was difficult to try to explain to a lot of people there was very few places we could go, you know, it was almost impossible to find a place to go.
Yeah.
And so we just had to do the best we could. Sometimes we had meetings, just sit down someplace and have a meeting in a restaurant, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But,
I've been running you for the last 5 minutes.
oh, you have? I didn't know that.
Got some good stuff.
I didn't know that.
Are you rolling? We're at the corner of Ben and Riverside Drive in the city of North Hollywood, California. At the present time, we're looking at a building which, although it has been altered since it first started, we first started NA, it is now a Valley Tourist Center. It was originally known as the North Hollywood Lodge and Sanitarium. More familiarly known as Schreier's Dryer. The medical director of the establishment was Dr. Schreier, who was well known to most of the members of the AA Fellowship and doctors in this area. He was having one of the best drying out spots, and he was a very honest man when he talked to drunks and an occasional addict at that time. We used to go to meetings here, AA meetings here, in the 1950, 1951, 52. But when we started Narcotics Anonymous and we were meeting up at the Dad's Club, Salvation Army Hall in Sun Valley, we met up there to continue the narrative a little bit. We met up there for about 6 months, and then they figured it was a little too far out of the way. Most of the other people lived more in this area than anywhere else. And since we were familiar with Schreier's Dryer, some of the people who were in the position of, let's say, power at that time, talked to Dr. Schreier, and he was all for giving a room to hold a meeting there once a week. The other part concerned with that I might have to touch on later. But we did have a meeting in a small room towards the back. That would be to the right, where some of the trees are seen on that particular part of the building. Small parking lot behind there. Of course, our meetings were very small once we got there. We were lucky if we had 5 or 6 people there most of the time. There was some conflict as to the traditions while we were here, so personally I didn't make too many meetings unless I had a newcomer in tow who was an addict, and I felt that the introduction to NA was the proper thing to do for anyone who had a problem with drugs other than alcohol. We did have meetings here for quite a long time, and then they tried to expand, and the next place in chronological order where we will go will be where they tried to have the other meeting. They then left Schreier's Dryer here for a while because there was remodeling going on. Not the remodeling you see now, but or what you can compare with in a still picture that I will show sometime later. But remodeling so that the entrance, which was a very small entrance, would be more available to the public with a larger door where they could get people in and out of the establishment rather than taking them through a door that was about 32 inches wide into a very small office in a long hallway. So then at that time they did move into another small sanitarium down on Ventura Boulevard that we'll see later. And so they would wind up at all types of meetings. But primarily they came to NA that one night a week. Some of the people, of course, as I have previously indicated, were still having trouble. The idea that an addict could stay clean, completely clean and free of all drugs, was still not widely accepted, although this is what we continued to press for. We didn't close the door on anyone. If people came in and sat at the meeting and nodding, we more or less relaxed a little bit and then talked to them later and see what we could do. It was at this particular hospital that I had a very great shock one night, a little later on. I had met a man who was very well known. You'd recognize his name, although he's dead, I'm not going to use it. This man was very well known throughout the world for his work in show business. And at the end of a meeting one night, he said, I would like to talk to you next week, either before or after the meeting. I said, you want to talk now? And he said, no, I'm getting my thoughts together. I think I'm finally going to really have to do something because I just can't seem to leave it alone all the way. But I'd like to talk. At the meeting the next week, there were about 8 or 9 of us at the meeting waiting till just about 20 after 8, waiting for the meeting to begin and hoping some more people would come in. And Grant hadn't arrived there as yet, so I figured, well, he may come in late or something. So I'll just see what happens. We heard the sirens coming right down this street where we're making this shot right now, coming towards the camera. That would be coming from the east towards the west, which is Laurel Canyon, one more block to the west of the sanitarium here. And turned the corner and took off going down south to the left, and then it died out. About 3 minutes later, one of the men, Cy, broke in the room and he was ashen. He was so pale that I thought maybe he had another problem, personal problem, because he did have a bad heart, a few other things wrong with him from his years of service in the Coast Guard, and he could hardly talk. He did have a little speech impediment at times when he got excited, so we tried to calm him down a little bit, and finally all we got out of him, it was Grant. It was Grant. I said, what's the hell's the matter with him? He's going to come over later. I got to talk to him. And he said, not tonight. He just went down and picked him up. He OD'd. And he's gone. Now, let me tell you, that was a kind of a rough meeting to get through that night for all of us. But with the small group we had at that time, we were pretty close together, even though we did have our differences of opinion. And we felt that impact. That was that fear that hung over us all the time at that time. Who's going to go out next? Who's going to make it back? And it was about the same time that one of the other favorite drugs of many people, Milltown, hit the scene. And one of the girls died 2 weeks after starting on Milltown. So we went through a lot of ups and downs in those days, right in the heart of this building here. And but it was not all as serious maybe as I'm making it sound, because we were still doing some 12-step work. We still saw some people coming in really beginning to make it. Recovery was becoming more, perhaps a little more easy, since there were more of us working. Good. Okay. If you notice the building at present, it's not really like it was in the days we're talking about, 1954, 55, 56 years. The sign that you see, Valley Forest Center, and the little drive, the little ramp rather, up towards the wall, was where they put in the larger door that I mentioned just a little earlier. But in the intervening years, they added on the left side that whole section where the front door is. The time I'm talking about, the 2-story part with the tile roof you see in the background was the end of the building. So this has all been added since the years that we're talking about. Now you'll be able to compare it when we shoot some of the still pictures I have and add them to this film. There's really not much more I can say about it, except this neighborhood has certainly built up an awful lot. In the intervening years, there's still some open lots in this section. I might add a historical note. 2 blocks west of where we're standing at Laurel Canyon and Riverside Drive was either the first or second gas station in the entire San Fernando Valley. It was owned in later years by a very good friend of mine for many years, and the other, which was either number 1 or number 2, was owned by the first man I ever met when I came to California in 1940. So that's just a little historical note I threw in to let you know what's going on in this valley. Just for the hell of it. Picking up with our commentary that we made at Schreier's Dryer, what we're looking at now is the Ventura Boulevard in Studio City, To the left is Eureka Place or Eureka Drive, I'm not sure which. And the other side, I can't see, I can't recall name. But it's at the 11,300 block on Ventura Boulevard in Studio City. We're panning towards sort of a steel gray building that at the time I'm talking about was painted a lighter color. This was a sanitarium where a few people were really trying to do something to help addicts because there was a lot of money in it at that time. Nobody else was doing it. Addiction was becoming more open. And I think perhaps NA had something to do with the fact that it wasn't a dirty word to be whispered in the dark corner when you were talking about drugs to also mention addicts, as it had been in the past and still is sometimes in some areas. There's a dog over there having an awful lot of fun on that sidewalk, Jimmy. Do you see that? He's having more fun than a barrel of monkeys. Always something doing on Ventura Boulevard. Of course, I could tell you about the girls too, but that's another story. This little building, they moved the meeting down here when they were remodeling the sanitarium, the other sanitarium on Riverside Drive. And for about a year, there were meetings here. I didn't particularly care for the place or the meetings. The rooms were rather small. Cubicles is about all they were, where they interviewed people that were looking for help. And there was no real large room to have a meeting. Maybe about 7 or 8 people at the most could be crowded into one of the places in the back. I wasn't too impressed with that, and I wasn't too impressed with the sanitarium idea. Never was. Perhaps I never will be. But give or take a few for whatever it might be worth. This is where we were for about a year. And after that, we moved back into Schreier's Dryer. I believe for a very short period of time, there were 2 meetings. And that's all the meetings there were in the world at that time. We moved from here back into Schreier's Dryer, and we're up there for a number of years until a few things happened, as I mentioned in previous parts of this tape, where NA eventually died out because the traditions were not being followed as well or as completely as they should. I think we've pretty well covered anything we have to do right now. It's just another little part of the history of NA where we met in the early days. So I think we'll sort of take it from here and go on to other places. We have moved over to Chandler Boulevard in the Burbank area. There were somewhere between Hollywood Way and Buena Vista, just for a geographic fix on this. And the house, the little house you see with the flat roof on the front, was rented by one of our original members in 1953 or early in 1954. Scott Kay, many people remember him. He's still around up north somewheres. Spoke to him about 4 months ago. We used to hold a few little meetings here, not too many, but once in a while we held meetings here in the beginning when we were trying to expand a little bit and start another meeting. And they also had a little garage in the back where they kept some of the stuff that belonged to the fellowships and booklets and so forth. This brings back a lot of memories to me, this house, because one time when the first Russian Sputnik had been launched successfully, and we were told that it would be able to be seen late at night in the southwest sky. We were over here at Scott's one night after a meeting, and most people had left and gone home. And another character named Paul S. that I've lost track of, I don't know where he is now. I didn't know at the time, but Scott wanted us out of the house because I wasn't paying much attention. I never care whether people are using or not. That doesn't make much difference to me. They're free to do what they want. But anyway, I mentioned to Scott that I sure would like to see Sputnik. I think we'll move over a little closer to the railroad. We'll move to get a little better shot of the railroad tracks. This is really a spur that runs into some of the businesses along here. It's not a really heavily traveled road, so there's not too much to worry about here. I have a train here about maybe 2 or 3 times a day. If you notice these large boulders right by the track in front of Scott's place, at that particular time, Scott and Paul and I got out of the house. It was about 11:30 at night. And we stood over here until we were craning our necks, and Paul kept up a steady conversation, and all of a sudden I realized that, that he was on Benny's again. And we were laying up, looking up at the sky, and my neck began to get so doggone sore, and I said to Paul, I said, you know, I don't think I can take this too much longer. It hurts. You know, and I said, you want to go back or something? He said, no, my mind doesn't bother me any. And so I lay down on the railroad tracks here with my head on the left rail. And I lay there for an hour and a half, and we couldn't see a thing. The sky was clear. We saw a few stars, but we didn't see anything moving. And by God, he kept on talking until 4:30 in the morning. I never did see Sputnik. But I talked to Scott the next day, and he said, when did you guys leave? And I told him, and he said, didn't you realize that Paul was really talking up a storm? I said, it's the first time anybody ever out-talked me. And he was quite able to do that. He told me everything in detail that he was doing with his work and everything else. He was a waiter in a nice place, and how much money he was making, and what nice clothes he had. And the usual stuff that we talk about, you know, when we're on the run. But that was years ago. You see, it wasn't much of a house then. It isn't too much of a house now. A little place. It's a nice, comfortable little place there, though, a small home. The wire fence is still around. The cyclone fence is still around it. But that was many years ago. That was in the, say, 1954, 55, 56, up until the period before we, well, I don't know when Sputnik went up. I think it was 58, 59, was it, or 60s. But Scott continued to live here for a long time after some of the other periods we've been talking about. I think that about covers Scott's place, unless we want to take another little shot down the railroad tracks a little bit so that the house can be identified a little better. We'll take a little walk down to the east. Maybe take a little quick shot, with or maybe or without a commentary. It doesn't make much difference. It sure brings back memories. That rail was awfully hard on my neck. I remember thinking, I don't know how the Japanese do it with that little wooden pillow that they put their neck on when they go to sleep. I don't think I'll ever want to try that. I still wonder whether that hurts their necks or not. Of course, I'm always curious about a lot of things anyway. And sometimes I want to try, and nowadays sometimes I don't care whether I ever try some of the things that I tried in the past. I think we're just about to a point where we can take a shot, a front view shot of the house. As you can see, it isn't very large, but it was very homey, very comfortable. His first children were born there. His wife at that time, they have since been apart. But his wife at that time is still clean in this area. We're now at the Unitarian Church of Studio City, which is located at Rhodes and Moore Park Streets in that town. In about the middle or towards the end of 1958, there was a meeting started at this church. It became more or less the mother group and the center of most of the activities of NA that went on here in the valley in those early years of our growth. I'm going to take a few shots of the outside of the church and do a little commentary on what went on at that time. Let me start by saying that the church, as you will see it here in just a second, here's my commentary is suffering from trying to find what I'm looking at here. Ah, here we are. The church faces the south, and it's a long porch with a tile roof, and a second story on the back with a long tile roof. The first two-story part I showed you was part of this church that my brother and I put the tile roof on about 1951, 52, or thereabouts. Towards the end of the porch, which would be to the west, there was a small room for children, sort of a children's room where they would leave their kids during services or when anything was going on and watch them. These were very small tables and chairs in there for children. But that's where we had our very first meetings, and probably for about 6 months or so. A very small room, it wouldn't hold more than about 10 people crowded, but at least it was the beginning. Later on we moved into the church proper, and we will go inside a little later on and show you those rooms where we did meet in the early days. And a little bit on the church and the church grounds, give you some idea of the size of the building. Looking west towards the next main street. Very beautiful piece of land right here. The trees have been here for many years. Some of them were here when they built the church. We now have a good-sized parking lot, which at different times we help to surface the part payment of rent. Also, in order to buy our literature, there's a few of us, mostly myself, repaired the roof every year and kept it in repair. Fairly good-sized parking lot. And to the right, there is quite a space reserved for playground for children and for outdoor activities. It extends down the street, about 300 feet or so. In the alley behind the church here, which I will move into very shortly, I will show you the back door that we went into most of the time for our meetings. Because that's where the big room was. It was sort of a coffee room, a meeting room. And later on, the particular part I'm showing you right now, the two-story part, there's a big hall, a large hall on the ground floor, and storage room and small rooms for meetings upstairs. We have met in both these places at different times. And other affairs were going on in the church. And we would exchange places with some of the others at times so they could have enough room to do what they needed to do. I have just another little quick shot of the front of the church and some of the grounds. It is very nice. Nicely laid out. don't know whether I mentioned in the beginning, this was not originally Unitarian church, but a Unity church. Mostly the buildings used to be residential here, but they are now practically all condominiums or apartments. And it has changed considerably, but the church remains pretty much what it was. Years have changed this valley very much. When I first came out here, 1940, there was supposedly about 131,000 people here. There's now approximately 1.5 million, perhaps a few more in the last couple of years. When we move back to the alley you see to your left and go into the rest of this narrative. We're going to be panning up towards the west part, the rear of the building here. This we're coming right off the alley. Chimney, as you see in the distance there. Big red chimney, a beautiful chimney on the inside, a fireplace. They used to keep us nice and warm some of those cold nights when we'd come in here, and of course that's cold for California. You know, it might have been about 40. And it's not very cold for other parts of the country, I imagine. But the door to the right, or rather to the left of the chimney, was the place we used most often to enter. This led us into the kitchen. And of course, after the meeting, we congregated as usual in the kitchen. These are the roofs that I kept in repair, especially on the back here. People would get up, walk out the windows, break the tile. And I was always making repairs, especially on the lower sections, front and rear. I think I'll move up one more time, up to the entrance to the alley that you see, and take a couple more shots. These will be followed a little later on by shots of the inside, where we met and what happened, and some of the things that occur to me as I go along in the commentary. We're now looking south to Moore Park Street at the corner of roads. I'm going to pan down the alley. This is where we used to come in most of the time to go to the meeting down into the parking lot. You can see the roof I was telling you about. Again, the tile and the chimney, and there's the door entrance right to the left of the chimney, and the little kitchen door right beside it. Many nights after the meeting, we'd stand out in this alley until sometimes we disturbed the neighbors, and they would come out and ask us to leave. But other than that, we had few, if any, problems. The rest I will do on the inside. I'll give you a few details of what went on in the early years when we started all over again. About a year after we first started to meet here. And we'll continue from that point on. It's a pretty noisy situation here on the corner of Reese and Magnolia Boulevard in the city of Burbank. We're looking across the street. You'll be able to see the sign on the custom upholstery shop, 1706. The pizza house next door, which I believe is 1708, used to be a liquor store in the early 60s. Behind the store, there was a small bachelor apartment where one of our members, Bill W., lived with Zona. He had a small swimming pool in the back, very small, much like a big more like a big sauna than anything else. Very small, homey bachelor apartment, very compact. The general rule, we couldn't get many more than about 8 people in there, and even then we were sitting on the double bed or on the floor on pillows. We only heard. It's a fairly noisy setup we have here. We're between Laurel Canyon and Vantage Streets, and I'm not sure where it's Studio City. I believe it is on this side of the street, or North Hollywood, which is the other side that we're looking towards. We'll pan back a little bit to a place that was originally rented by my brother, who was also on the program for a long period of time, in the early or mid-60s. This is where we used to have meetings on Monday nights for quite a long time, when Danny M. was the renter of this property at that time. It is a duplex, and this is the front apartment, which was a rather nice apartment. In these years, we had people who were coming fairly regularly to this meeting, like Scott and Rhoda and Frank. Peppy, I believe, used to come over here too, of course myself, and quite a number of others besides Danny, of course. And we had some good meetings. I do have some of these meetings from the early days on some tape that we made years ago. Tapes are a little indistinct because even then we had this noise factor that we're facing right now. However, we do have some tapes that are fairly understandable. We'll go into that later. We're down the street from the church where the mother group was. I'm going to slowly pan around here. Well, just a second here. I can't remember the exact number. I don't know whether we can see it or not on this shot. I don't see the number. I recall the number is 12114, and it's hidden behind that post. This area, unlike across from the church, as we mentioned earlier, is still quite residential, except on a little bit west of where we are. Pan to the west, we're facing the east, and face down the street toward the church, which you cannot see, but it's just in the distance. This particular street, someone has turned the sign around on the North and South Street, which is supposed to be Vantage Street. It has been turned around, and it now looks like we're on Moore Park, which is not quite right. I'm going to pan back to the sign across the street, which is the proper sign. If I can find it here. A little bit of difficulty somewhere. Getting this to come down a little bit. There we are. My camera work leaves a little bit to be desired, but perhaps we can straighten this out when we recap some of it. I'm going to make a complete swing. Across the street, just for bearings. Some friends of mine used to live right across the street here many years ago. Members of North Hollywood chapter of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was just down there We found that one of our members, Frank C., he used to also come to this meeting. His little apartment, bachelor apartment in the rear of the building, which houses the EA Clubhouse, or rather North Hollywood Clubhouse, has been torn down, and there's a big duplex or condominiums on that spot. We made a complete circle here on coming back to Laurel Canyon. I think I'll knock it off about here and try to go on to something else. Gas station that I got a shot of was owned by one of my oldest friends in the valley, and this is the site of either the first or the second gas stations in the San Fernando Valley in years gone by. The other location was up near the Torah Temple, which was originally Dr. Schreier's, and on that corner was either the first or the second. There's some argument about which came first, but they were the first two locations for gas stations in San Fernando Valley many years ago. We're relocated here just west of Lancashire Boulevard, which is in the heart of North Hollywood. We are east 2 blocks of Lancashire. The 11615 plus other numbers. I'm a little chronologically out of step here, but I thought when I was in the neighborhood just to take this and set it in its proper place later on. This is an apartment house that I think you can see the corner apartment just this side of the corner where the steps go up to the second floor. This is an apartment that Penny Kay, who's now in San Jose, lived in. I believe she had some meetings here for some of the girls the early days. I think this was around the probably mid-60s, maybe a little later than that when Penny moved here or lived here. I can't remember where she lived previously. Penny is one of the girls that came in 61, February of 61, out of CIW in Frontera, and has been with us ever since. Her story is in the Little White Book, as many of you have read. I'm just going to swing a little to the west here. Give you some idea. It's about where we are in relation to the other portions of the valley here. Facing now completely west. I see this is a very, very busy location. Even the time of the afternoon that this is on Saturday afternoon, the 3rd of March, 1984. I'll swing back and maybe try to get another little shot. See a large building to the west, which has you can't see it's on the other side of that building. There's a large Olympic mural. Shame we can't see it from here, but we can. So we'll have to save that for another day or something else. Get back and get a composite shot here as to what it really looks like. Swing back to where we were in relation to the other parts of the film that I'm taking. You can see Penny's area there is the first apartment at the foot of the stairs. I don't know whether we can see any numbers from here or not. Rather doubt it. Many a time after meetings we would come back here and sit and talk and have coffee, discuss parts of the program, and try to figure out what we're going to do next. We got sort of hold us on this. Okay. We're back at the Unitarian Church at Rhodes and Moore Park. We're focusing in on what is known as the Evelyn J. Sprague Room. I believe this was a room that was set aside by someone who had donated some money to help the church in regards to the children. This was a children's room. I mentioned a little earlier, it's very small tables, very small chairs, where the children came in while the parents were occupied in other church activities. And inside, it's only actually about 15 by 10 deep, and but we could get about 10 or 12 people in there. And we were met here for perhaps several months until we were able to get into part of the rear of the building beside the church proper. I think we'll turn around now and give you another view of this particular spot. And we'll then go up on the porch and go to the right of the camera, which is towards the east. And we'll see the room on the first floor of the two-story part of the building. This first floor is also a meeting room. And I might as well throw in right now that my wife and I were married here about 6.5 years ago. The Reverend Schneider, of course, was our first non-addict trustee, and he has been dead for quite a number of years now, about, I think, almost 15, 16 years. He was quite a man. He convinced his board that they should allow us to meet, at least for a while, to see how we would do, to see if we were okay, and later on we used them as a reference point for other churches, other pastors in this general area to call and get a reference as to our capacity to live a decent, clean life. This was a big help in many ways, because previous to this time it was almost impossible to find a public place that would allow us to have meetings. As soon as we mentioned addicts or Narcotics Anonymous, they clammed up, they closed their minds, and we were out. So the Reverend Schneider, Herb, was a great help to us in the beginning. I think we'll move over now and give you another look from the porch proper. This porch faces south. And in the afternoon when the sun is not here, it's a very, very quiet and very nice place to sit, which many of us have done at times. And sometimes we would drive by here during the day. We just stop the car and go over here and sit on this porch just to go sort of think things over, meditate a little bit, because it was not as noisy then 20-some years ago, 24, almost 25 years ago to be exact, as it is now. Across the street, as you saw in the previous pictures I took, were now condominiums and apartment houses. At that time, it was very residential. They were small, nice, well-kept homes across the street. This was a fairly quiet neighborhood. It will move up towards the entrance to the church proper, the hallway, and go inside, and there we can give you an opportunity to see the places where we did have our first meetings. This was known as the Mother Group, because it was the first real place where we felt that we were going to be able to accomplish something as time went on. We've been here with only a few short periods of time. We have been in this church ever since. One step. Ever since we started. Those times were when something else was going on. At one time they opened their doors to, we are now inside in the foyer of the church, and looking at the door we just entered in, on the left-hand side, or rather on the right-hand side coming in the door, is now the little area where they sell books concerning the church and so forth. we did in the beginning, they allowed us to put some of our white booklets there for people who were interested, in case anyone did have a drug problem and wanted to do something about it. This is probably the first place that was ever done in the open, so it's another sort of little landmark. This church, as I said, was Unity Church in the beginning. And these people were very wide open to new ideas. And of course, since then, it is a Unitarian church, and they are also wide open to new ideas. The church proper that we will be entering in just about a minute here is a fairly large room. There's enough room in here for about 200 people, give or take a few, and there's quite a bit of light coming through the windows that are between the first and second floor. It makes it a very pleasant place, as a matter of fact. And looking towards the altar, present time, and you'll notice on the right there are some posts into another small shed-type roof that comes from the second story down. There is no second story in this part. The church goes up 2 floors, rather a little more than 2 floors, and immediately above where the camera sits there are some offices and other buildings where we also have had meetings at different times. The posts you see were originally at the end near the altar. There was a door, they were enclosed, and there was a doorway into the church proper so it could be separated from the other room, and where the fireplace is, and the chairs are set up in tables. And between the other posts there was only a small passageway for people to walk this side of the first post, and between those two were flower arrangements in like a planter, large planters with real flowers and real plants. It made it very nice in there. I think we will now make another move and get into the area where we have met most of the time in the intervening years. Now proceed up the aisle here to the area where we used to meet most often. And you'll see that in just about a second here. This is the area, so you can see we could get quite a number of people in this little room over here. The fireplace. We've gotten as many by setting up just a head table, setting up chairs. We used to have 40, 45 people in here, say around 63, 64, 62. But a lot of them were just looking. They were not really interested in doing anything. They had heard about us. The grapevine was at work. And they were in here mostly looking, but a few people did stay. And as the years went by, we picked up 1 or 2 here and there that seemed to be committed to the program. The idea that addicts could stay clean, especially the so-called, and I say so-called hardcore addicts, could stay clean, was still a little bit strange to most people, regardless of their status, whether they were addict or otherwise. Most of the professionals we talked to were of the opinion that addicts never got any better. You would clean them up, and for a little while they stay clean, but they always return, and they never got any better. This was the big lie that we were trying so far. Looking back to where we originally came in the door of the church proper, and above where the camera was, you can see the choir loft. As you notice, this church is rather wide open with the transverse lights on each side between the first and second floors. That let in a lot of light, much in the style of the old California missions, where they had much this treatment architecturally. We're going to pan down now again and go over to the area to the left, where we did have our meetings most of the intervening years that we've been here. As you can see, it's all practically one room at the present time since they took out the flower boxes, or the big long planters that went between the posts. The kitchen, of course, where you see the sign, the exit, is to the left. We're coming around now to the fireplace, which was a welcome thing on cool evenings here in California, especially during the wintertime. We had some cold winds, and occasionally had a little nip in the air, and sometimes a little bit of snow, which may sound strange, but that's the way it was. We will probably now take a look down towards the other open windows to a door that used to open. I think they have it closed entirely now on that side. It's not a entranceway anymore, unless they need to bring a piano or furniture in and out. I could, and I will maybe later on, talk about something that happened at that door many years ago, but I'll save that for future reference. Go back to that old warm fireplace. That still looks pretty good, although it's warm here today. But we're going to go down and go through the kitchen, where many strange things happened in years gone by. I used to, at the meetings, used to say that none of the women, there were very few of them, but none of the women who came into the meetings were going to do any dishes. We were using regular china cups and saucers for the cookies and so forth, and I said that the men had to do the washing up of the dishes and the cleanups. The women did enough in their lifetimes, that kind of stuff, but I think we should get a little bit of a break. Of course, a lot of the guys voted me down on that, or tried to vote me down, but eventually it did take hold. And ordinarily, the only women we would allow in the kitchen were those who insisted, because then we figured if they wanted that bad to do it, well, we would let them. Many funny things happened between this room and that kitchen, where you see we would open the door where this little shelf is to serve coffee and cakes. This is where we first started the practice of giving cakes for birthdays, and in the early days there weren't too many cakes being given, but thank God there were a few people that just stayed there. We look forward to their birthdays every year. Now it's such a common practice throughout the world to give something on birthdays that it's easy to lose sight of the fact of how much it meant to us in the beginning. To see somebody get a cake for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of sobriety, it was almost unheard of. Yeah, we're taking a look into the kitchen. You can see it isn't very large, but it was large enough for what we wanted to do, and certainly large enough for the church. They have dinners. They used to have a lot of fun, come down once in a while and help the church women set up here. Sometimes before we would have our meeting, they would have something going on. We'd help them clean up a little bit as part appreciation for the fact that we were allowed so much freedom in this particular building. And they were very open. These people, when they found out who we were and what we were trying to do, were most appreciative, because later on, as I found out, some of their kids were getting into drugs at that time, and they felt that we were trying to do something to help in the community as well as just to help ourselves. I think that things were much newer in this kitchen in those days. Things look a little bit beat up right now, but I guess we all get beat up with the signs of age. And there's our old coffee urns that we were allowed to use here, and many a dish we've done in that sink to the right. They allowed us to use all their dishes, which was another thing that we appreciated. Although I might say that at some of the meetings, if you ever hear any of the tapes that we tried to make in those early days, 60, 61, 62, 63, you'll find that the noise of the dishes and the cups and the heels on the wooden floor were enough to drive you up the wall trying to make a decent tape that you could hear. However, we do have some, and they're noisy, but they're memory tapes is what I call them, because most of the people on those tapes, with very few exceptions, are no longer with us. However, we have to look at the fact that many of the people who are not here today are the reason for my still being here and many others still being here. They helped to carry the message in maybe ways that we didn't like at that time. We've heard many disturbing stories at meetings and in this kitchen about people who went out again and are no longer with us, what happened to them. But we learned to separate ourselves from those parts and to concentrate on the positive aspects of a fellowship such as ours, and to not become too emotionally involved in the past and in the things that were happening that really did not apply to our program. I think we're just about finished here with what we're doing at the church, and we'll take one more look into the hall of this door that's that we will be seeing. The other exit door to the alley is a door that we come in mostly at Friday nights. We had a key to this door. We would come in this door and set up, do whatever business we had to attend to, and clean up and take off and have another good meeting. So fundamentally, we're pretty well covered the church, with the exception of the upstairs rooms, which are very small rooms and really are not that important at this time, or at any time for that matter, as far as the story of NA is concerned. Looks like they're still doing some work. They're always working around here. They're doing some cement work outside, so we can't leave by this door, which I would like to have done, but we have to bow to circumstances at times. I think we're going to about wrap this up right at the present minute. I think we've covered everything that we can possibly cover as far as the Unitary. We're located at the present time at the Lutheran, what was the Lutheran Hospital, now it's called Hillview Center, in the Lakeview Terrace section of the San Fernando Valley. It's on Eldridge and Cagle Canyon area. There's a new hospital down here that wasn't here in the time I'm talking about. We're looking at the Santa Monica Mountains that run from the valley down to the sea, and we're going to pan around and come back towards the left, which would be to the east, and then to the north. You'll see the hospital, the Hillview Center Hospital. This is the original Lutheran hospital. In I think it was about 1969, 1970, there was a meeting started here, and it was held, I guess, for about a year and a half, until finally the earthquake of February the 9th, 1971 wiped out the meeting, because the building that you're beginning to observe now on the left side of the hill, the pharmacy building, has numerous little meeting places on the second floor. This is where we had some meetings for, as I say, about a year and a half or thereabouts. This building was not too badly damaged. They were able to repair it. The other building was only slightly damaged, but we never did get back here for one reason or another. I don't know exactly why, but we never did get back to have our meetings. However, it's one of those breakthroughs again that we were able to get into a medical facility and hold meetings on a regular scheduled basis. We'll probably come up a little closer to show you the entranceway, and it's a nice clear day here today. You can probably hear the wind whistling through my ears here and around the camera and the cameraman. So you see this is nice. The hills behind us are part of the San Gabriel Range that runs from the east in San Gabriel area almost down to the ocean on the west. These hills are not too big. We're a little high here, as you saw. The valley goes down behind us. These hills are probably 1,000 to 1,200 feet, but they're foothills, really. We call them mountains, but they're foothills. I don't know whether we should swing all the way around. Do you want to swing around all 360 degrees and go back to where we originally started?
Worried about the sun a little bit.
Well, I think, wish I had something to shade it. Would that do it? Up there? You're going to catch your hand, aren't you?
Caught a finger.
We've almost made a 360-degree turn here and back approximately to where we were shooting in the beginning. Gives you some idea of the expanse of the valley for those of you who keep asking where's the San Fernando Valley, how big is it, and so forth. I think that'll about wrap up what we're doing at this particular point.
It just zoomed in.
We're set up now in Panorama City, near the juncture of Woodman Avenue and Roscoe Boulevard. We're looking at a small shopping center. You notice the delicatessen on the left. A Woodman Shoe Repair shop in the center, directly ahead, and a drugstore on the other side, an MD drugstore. What is now the shoe shop was originally Bill B's barber shop. He had, as I recall, a 7-chair barber shop in this area. This is where in 1968 what had then grown to be Narcotics Anonymous in this area got together to make some changes so that we would eventually have some type of structure that would guarantee our ongoing success. I had been the only trustee for something like 4 years, and as I used to say, I was a minority of one most of the time. Of course, I'm used to being a minority among the greatest minority of all time, which is the minority of addicts in this world. So that didn't bother me too much, but I got tired of people asking me what they should do, and I didn't feel that that was right. So we did eventually, and we'll go into it later in fuller detail, start the ball rolling towards a more suitable structure, if we could call it that, a loosely knit fellowship with some structure to ensure our growth. I'm going to pan north a little bit. I can't see very much here, but to give you some idea of where we're located. This is Dale's Market, and to the north, which is to the left where I'm panning now, is actually about a block and a half away to the main intersection. It's a very busy little section of town. I'm going to try to pan all the way around here to give you some idea what this area looks like. You very slowly take it around and see what we can come up with. I may have to stop here. The sun is getting pretty bright, and I don't want to foul up the picture. Picking up where I left off, so it is a little noisier here. I'm panned to the east. I'm going to swing around pan to the south. We will see the Kaiser Permanente Hospital in the foreground. Very active, very busy hospital here in the valley. We'll take another pause here, so I had to make a turn here. And this is continuing around the 360-degree turn back to the barber shop and so forth, so that we got a complete turnabout right here in this neighborhood. I'll take another little close-up. The light is not as good as it might be, but I believe that we can get something here. One of our members, Gene H., who lived here in Sylmar and who worked at one of the other hospitals in this area up in these foothills, started a meeting at this Sylmar facility, I believe around the end of 1969 or early in 1970. And there was a meeting going on in this building for approximately a year and a half or 2 years before the earthquake wiped us out. It's a rather nice, quiet location up against the hills here. Although there's a lot of activity going on down in the valley proper, an awful lot of apartment houses being built, condominiums just to the rear where the camera is. And I imagine in about the next 10 years there won't be anything for sale up here. That is any land for sale. It looks like it's getting pretty well used up in a hurry. Very noisy place today. We got some beautiful cloud cover in the valley today. We had a little rain a little while ago. I'm in what is known as Pacoima, on San Fernando Road, at approximately 9323 on San Fernando Road in San Fernando Valley. The pen down towards the west is looking west on San Fernando Road towards the old town of San Fernando, one of the oldest little towns in Southern California, Mission Town. The San Fernando Mission is located. What we're looking at now is a building that has changed very little on the outside in the past 40 years. The door that you see to the left, between the two windows that are boarded up, is Tommy M. I can mention his name now, Tommy Moore's Barbershop. Tommy was one of the original members of the first board, the first 5 boat-man board of Narcotics Anonymous in 1953. There's really not much to be seen here, but I thought it'd be wise to get a picture of what is left of it. Very small barbershop, just a one-man barbershop. I'll probably mention more about Tommy later on in the narrative. Really not much to be seen here. It's a very small town. Predominantly now Latin and black. Some of the old timers still live around here, but they're dying out pretty fast. The liquor store was there many years ago, still there. Still busy. Still causing problems, I guess.